Hello and welcome to the Podcastodon. I'm Dylan Smith.
And I'm Western Union Money Transfer Service.
And this month we're ripping off Trash Taste and talking about what I call the early stage feudalism of VTuber agencies.
You have me intrigued.
So, people often like to talk about the late stage capitalism of X, right? But I think a better, more descriptive phrase for what I want to talk about is early stage feudalism. So, go with me on this journey, okay?
Am I getting on your spaceship of the
You're
imagination?
getting on my horse-drawn cart of the imagination because we're going back in time to the late Roman Empire.
I was going to say, what about your just ship of the imagination?
My trireme of the imagination. Anyway,
maybe.
we're going back in time to the late Roman Empire. So, I'm going to say some stuff, and you can tell me if it checks out historically. In the Roman Empire, there was originally a strong central government that provided for people. And as the power of the central government was eroded, localized power became more important, and rulers began to extract more wealth from people who lived on quote-unquote their land.
I don't have the figures for how much taxes people...
My point is that there's this feudal hustle, right? I don't know if this actually came in during the late Roman Empire. I know from some stuff from like Roman history that this kind of thing happened before. There was the whole client and patron relationship where your patron was like a rich person and you do stuff for them and in exchange they give you money. This is kind of the reverse where you pay money to your landlord. But point is, the feudal hustle basically goes like this. You have a bunch of people who live on your land and they produce something and they work the land and they give you a percentage of it so that you make a lot of money or grain. I think a lot of the time it was grain, right? You'd make a lot of money without really having to do anything.
Okay, I disagree on that point. That your feudal overlord did not do anything. They're providing the services that the Roman Empire is no longer providing. So they're resolving disputes, they're like planning construction, they're conducting diplomacy with other people. And most importantly, they're leading raiding parties to steal loot, which is distributed back into your local economy. Because the dispensing of gifts to the constituency was a major
But
part
do you
of
really have
this.
an option if you're a peasant to not be under a feudal lord?
Well, given what I've heard about early feudalism in Russia, there's the alternative of reaching out to another dude and getting him to overthrow your current feudal lord. That happens. The way I would describe early feudalism is basically the Roman provincial government system repivoting itself into an autonomous system, which requires the creation of local armies and the payment of taxes directly to the leader.
So there's also like a chain of this stuff. As you get later on into the Middle Ages, there's a chain of like lords that goes all the way up to the king, right? And at each level, like, stuff is being made and then people are skimming profit off of it. The people who skim profit get really rich because they can make more money without doing more work.
In the early Middle Ages, you're forgetting the raiding economy. After the fall of the Roman Empire, in a lot of states you have constant endemic warfare, and you can view the medieval state as basically a peasant class that exists to support a military class that prevents the peasant class from being wiped out, which allows some states to survive.
So there's a combination of this skimming with also raiding.
I mean, we're kind of looking at multiple different situations.
Yeah, well, the Middle Ages was an incredibly long period.
I'm specifically looking at the very early
But still,
Ages.
it probably varied a lot geographically, right?
Yes. For example, in Spain, Visigothic Spain was essentially a pure Roman successor state in which all of the same institutions were preserved, despite being run by, quote, barbarians, unquote. Similarly, in, I believe, the kingdom of Odoacer in Italy was operated in a very Roman fashion. But in Europe further north, where you have your Germanic kingdoms, or your Celtic kingdoms, basically a nomadic raider. It's kind of a shitty life, right? You don't know where you're going to be sleeping, you don't necessarily have a guaranteed stream of income. It's very precarious. But if you settle in a town and collect tribute, you get a guaranteed stream of income. And the locals have the advantage of not being killed by you. And they have a second advantage, that people no longer raid them because you're there. And so their goal becomes produce food to support themselves and food to support a pure warrior society in Northern Europe. That's how you get very early aristocracy.
Part of my point here is that it does create aristocracy, right?
Aristocracy, at least feudal aristocracy, as opposed to like Roman bureaucratic aristocracy, comes out of a society of endemic
Interesting.
bandit.
Okay, so we're going to forget about that for a minute, but just keep that in the back of your mind. Like, we're going to change topics, but this is a literary device known as foreshadowing, and I'm not sure if this will work very well. I'm not sure if it's going to be good foreshadowing, but we're doing it. Okay, so let's talk about VTubers not. Not. I read the word not.
Are you about to suggest that VTubers engage in cattle raiding?
They engage in stream raiding, but not cattle raiding. Okay, so first of all, we should probably talk about what a VTuber is, because I don't think we can assume that everybody listening to this knows what a VTuber is. So, VTuber is short for virtual YouTuber, and it basically refers to somebody who streams on like Twitch or something, but instead of a face cam, they have an animated character that tracks their movements. Usually they're sort of anime style characters. This idea has kind of been around for a while, but it really got popular, I would say, like, it first kind of kicked off around 2017 because there was this VTuber called Kizuna Ai who kind of coined the term. She was sort of considered the quote-unquote first VTuber. It was not as much of a thing before Kizuna Ai. And then, like, there were other companies that tried to get in on this, and we'll talk about this in a second, but basically Kizuna Ai was sort of, the idea was sort of created by this company. I don't remember what it's called. I don't think it's as big a deal now. So Kizuna Ai was basically the quote-unquote first, and then over the next couple years, they sort of steadily grew in popularity until I think the real explosion of like VTuber popularity was around 2020, like with the pandemic. I could be wrong about that, but that's my impression. I think it was around that time when I started seeing like VTubers recommended on YouTube and stuff. I think it was also when the first like big group of English-speaking VTubers debuted. Yeah, Holomyth all debuted around September 2020.
I've got to add, all VTubers
yes,
are...
there is a there is a running joke that all among a shadowy group that we are part of, that all VTubers are on crack. Lorem ipsum, all VTubers are on crack, bottom text.
I call it
Jump rock?
Yeah,
okay.
Well, so does Last Podcast on the left.
Part of the deal with most VTubers is that they have a sort of character that they're supposed to be. For the like original English Hololive characters, like there's a one who's supposed to be like a shark person. There's like a Shinigami Grim Reaper person. There's a phoenix who just looks mostly human but is supposed to be a phoenix.
Well, I mean, none of the other ones look like what they're supposed to be.
It's more like their designs are intended to suggest these things rather than like it's their gimmick. Yeah, it's sort of like pro wrestlers in a way, except that it's not like pro wrestlers. Because they have like a gimmick and they have their lore, and there's a certain element of kayfabe where they will try to they'll try to play their character on stream, but there's only so much you can play a character when you're streaming for like 6 hours a day. You have to have a lot of stamina, of acting stamina, to keep that up. And so I feel like a lot of VTubers, if they're not just full on like playing themselves, a lot of their real personality leaks in. There's definitely an element of kayfabe to it, but I think that it's less than you might think.
So, as is appropriate for this being trash taste, I'm getting absolutely blasted.
What do you have?
Water.
You're getting blasted on water.
I didn't say drunk. I said I'm getting
Do
blasted.
you have like a sand blaster or something?
You can't hear it, but I'm in a wind tunnel. But luckily, the Kadokawa Corporation is giving me very good money for acoustics equipment to filter that out.
You just have a like a very very precise shotgun mic.
As we are doing Trash Taste, I've got to shout out that we're sponsored by the Kadokawa Corporation. And in fact, they would like to remind you that we now own all of your sex fantasies. They've filed copyrights on them. And if you don't pay them regularly, Kadokawa Corporation's cyborg corporate samurai will show up at your house and repo your
Is that the
organs.
missing piece of the VTuber feudalism puzzle? The corporate samurai. Okay, we'll get to it. We'll get to it.
The other part of this that's important for the VTuber stuff is that they're putting their intellectual property in your sex fantasies, so you have to pay them royalties.
Yes.
And also, drink G Fuel. G Fuel, of course, being gangster fuel.
No, clearly the most gangster energy drink is Jernj.
But you think Jernj would bother sponsoring fucking small timers like Trash Taste? They've gone directly
my
to
audio
Mr.
just
Beast,
clipped.
and the Paul brothers and KSI and like whatever fucked up group of British dudes is now fucking 2 or 3 streamers down from the Paul brothers and fucking Mr. Beast, and like Judge is sponsoring those real successful YouTubers like Happy Funtime Finger Family Nursery Rhymes for Kids, or that guy who just like removes cysts on camera.
God.
We like to joke that Trash Taste is like ridiculously successful to the point where it's like stupid, but they're strictly B tier when it comes to like cyst popping and neck cracking and like match lighting fetishes.
The curve of popularity on YouTube is very steep. So like the vast majority of channels will never ever get as big as Trash Taste.
I'd make a comment about some major YouTubers and their steep curves, but I don't know the names of enough. They're like high-level female YouTubers.
Wait, does steep curve mean they're flat or they're curvy?
I have no idea. Look, I've reached a level of disgusting where the words that come out of my mouth don't make sense.
You might make a good VTuber.
Motherfucker, if you see me again, I'm going to be in Genoa. 1 in 3 Americans is dying of cancer.
Is this the fucking Tool sample of the Italian guy yelling at them?
Not the first bit. The first bit was just.
Didn't you make a song saying that you were going to Istanbul? So you canceled your trip to Istanbul.
No, I've been to Istanbul.
Getting back to what I was talking about, here's a little thought experiment, right? Suppose you're an entrepreneur. You want to make as much money as possible because that's what businesses do. How do you make the maximum amount of money for the least amount of work? The way that you make money or you make profit is to get as much revenue while spending as little as possible. Profit is revenue minus cost.
Yes. Are we going to discuss the conflict between the hoarding impulse and the investment
What I'm mostly
impulse?
interested in talking about right at this moment is the case of an entrepreneur trying to get a business going. I think mostly what entrepreneurs think about when they're starting a business is, will this be able to make a profit in the future?
Yes, will my small farming community be
How do you make a
self-sustaining?
profit? Well, you make as much money as possible for as little investment as possible, or as little cost as possible. So, what is a really easy way to do that? Well, if you can find somebody who is creating value somehow and skim some of the value that they're creating, make it so that they have to pay you some of that, then you have figured out a way to get money for nothing, as the Dire Straits song goes.
and your chicks for free. I call this the pimping theory of small business ownership.
Oh God. You find some people who are producing value. If you can convince them to give you a cut of what they produce, then you have just acquired money for nothing. And if you keep doing this, making more and more of these kinds of businesses, eventually you can get really rich this way.
Better than the example of pimping, which, from what I understand, involves actual effort. This is the porn star's psychopath boyfriend method of making money. Which is that you just attach yourself to somebody and live off of their money.
That's not quite an accurate analogy to what I'm going to be talking about, because
we're not talking about human
VTuber
leeches.
agencies do something. They're not totally leeches. The analogy that I was originally using was feudal lordship, but it seems like VTuber agencies don't steal as much cattle.
Yeah, you've got cattle raiding, Moat and Bailey construction, grain rationing, the singing of heroic songs.
Well, in this case, the VTubers are the ones singing the songs.
It would be better if the managers
if they sang heroic songs about the exploits of their talent.
Oh, and distribution of gold, gems, and cattle.
Well, not stolen, but they do handle payroll, I assume.
Yeah, that's one of the important things about being an early feudal nobleman, is that you have to dispense gifts to get people on your side. Also, depending on the society, the nobleman himself may own cattle and...
Yeah, getting back to the entrepreneur example. Imagine you're an entrepreneur. You're looking for people whose value you can skim money off of. So YouTubers are a pretty decent choice for this because they're relatively autonomous. They probably don't have lawyers backing them up or somebody who can kind of fight for them. So it's easier to kind of push them into signing contracts. And it's harder for them to get popular. If you're just one YouTuber, it's really, really hard to get lots of views. If you have marketing money and stuff, that's also really helpful. So you can legitimately provide a service for them, but also you can kind of pressure them into accepting a contract because they're just one person and they don't necessarily have great business skills because that's not what they're good at. They're a YouTuber. So in the past, there were these multi-channel networks that kind of tried to do similar things, seemingly. I don't get the impression that they were very successful. People who've done more YouTube stuff can correct me on this, but I don't get the impression that those kinds of things really took off. But a big problem with if you start a company and then you want to sign people to it and have them creating videos and stuff, is they can just leave because the fans are loyal to them and not to the company. Actually, Channel Awesome might be a good example of this, right? I don't know exactly what their agreement was. I don't know if they were actually taking a cut of what people made. I would guess that they probably were, but I'm not positive. But the fact remains that people were loyal to the creators who worked for Channel Awesome, not to Channel Awesome itself.
I still watch Linkara. Stop the Fourth Wall is a
Channel Awesome's main selling point was that it had good people on it, not that it itself did anything special.
I think Ed Glazer was on Channel Awesome. If you don't know who Ed Glazer is, he's one of the great heroes of film preservation for getting the good 35mm print of Turkish Star Wars and putting it on Blu-ray. Ed Glazer is a personal hero of mine because I'm fascinated by historical ephemera, things not meant to be viewed.
You have people like that, and you also have Lindsay Ellis, rap critic, Todd in the Shadows, right?
Yeah, but in terms of doing something good for humanity, Ed Glazer has
I think there's a significant argument to be made that Lindsay Ellis has done a lot of good for humanity just by making people's politics better.
I don't know, new leftism is fleeting, but foreign remakes are eternal.
I think that Lindsay Ellis's analysis, it reaches a bit beyond the trendy parts of new leftism. I think that's not giving her enough credit. But the point is, the thing that Channel Awesome had going for it was that it had creators that people wanted to watch. And when those creators left, people went with them.
This is like when Charlemagne's empire split into a series of smaller empires because he divided it among his three
See,
heirs.
I'm telling you, this is feudalism.
But here's the thing, though. All of those were undeniably worse off and weaker than the previous empire. It took them a long time to recover. It doesn't seem like that happened for the Channel Awesome people.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what happened to, like, I would imagine that their viewers dipped for a while, but I think Lindsay Ellis ended up being more popular after she left Channel Awesome.
So is she just the France of this story?
Lindsay Ellis's France confirmed. I don't know about like the other creators, like big Channel Awesome creators. I don't know about like what Linkara's numbers are like, for example. But yeah, I would imagine that it comes with some difficult. Leaving the channel would come with some difficulty. Because there are people who probably didn't follow them to the new channel just because it's a new channel and that requires them to click an extra thing.
Most of them didn't change channels. Channel Awesome is a metaphorical
Oh,
channel.
okay.
Channel Awesome was a website that hosted multiple YouTube
Interesting.
channels.
They didn't have like separate YouTube channels for when they were under Channel Awesome versus when they were under their own stuff.
Linkara didn't, Rap Critic didn't, Todd
Cool.
certainly didn't. I wanted to say that multi-channel networks are basically akin to one of said feudal overlords getting overthrown by like the illegitimate
Why do
third
you say
son
that?
or something. Because when you're a feudal overlord, if you're more trouble to have around to not, your lifespan is
More
limited.
trouble to whom? To your family?
Also to the peasants. I'm not talking about an overthrow of government here. I'm more talking about just
Rioting is difficult. You risk getting attacked by troops. So whatever is going on has to be bad enough that you're willing to risk your life rioting.
Well, my point is that if you're bad at running a kingdom, something is going to break. Because there's not a large margin of error for being a feudal lord, because you live in a society where there's very limited agricultural
We live in a
surplus.
society. This maps onto the whole thing about like lots of VTuber agencies going bust, because that's a thing.
Here's the thing. It's not so much that the peasants will get you, it's that your immediate neighbors will get you. If you're incompetent, most likely what's going to happen is that the lord down the street, so to speak, is going to outmaneuver you and either oust you or more likely just become your de facto
I can't speak to the VTubing equivalent of that, but I do know a lot of VTuber agencies have just gone bust. But anyway, if you are trying to become like a lord of the streamers, so to speak, this presents a big problem because they can easily just leave, or relatively easily just leave. So really what you need is something that makes it hard for them to leave. Enter the VTuber avatar. Because the thing is, if your company owns the copyright to the VTuber avatar, they can't take the copyright with them when they leave. Hence, that provides them with a really strong incentive to stay with you. And so this is the missing piece to the hustle, right? It's the equivalent of like making it hard for the peasant to get up off the land, right? They can't really do that easily.
It was de facto impossible to leave in the early Middle Ages.
Because, like, what are you going to do?
Are you going to abandon land you have for land
in the wildlands of the internet? You can't take your VTuber avatar with you.
Your VTuber avatar is like your plot of land.
Depending on the agency's policy. I don't think all agencies actually do this, but if the agency owns the rights to your character, then you can't leave. And this is the other part of it. It's, I think, kind of essential that it's anime. Because anime fans really like anime girls. They really like the character. And if you leave, sure, it's your voice, but it won't be the same character.
Yes, though some have
Who has pulled it off?
You know about Asakoko, Kiryu Koko, whatever the fuck she goes by?
The name sounds familiar.
There was this VTuber, she was Japanese language, she was kicked for not holding their standards of decency. She would introduce streams with good morning motherfuckers. Like, she was going in all manner of weird directions. She got graduated, as they say, in the unusually disturbing
It's the
euphemism.
dystopian euphemism of graduating a VTuber. Yes.
And then she reinvented herself as like a juvenile delinquent Japanese high
Oh,
school gangster
is that
VTuber.
Kason you're thinking of?
Yeah, Kason used
Yeah.
to be
Okay.
affiliated with a business.
Well, didn't she not
So,
used to be a VTuber though?
no, I think she was always a VTuber.
Okay. Huh.
Point is, in a medieval example, this is like how if you ran to a city, the city would protect you from your lord trying to take you back. And if you stayed there 3 years, you were legally free, at least in England.
Huh.
Which, as the Middle Ages go on and Europe becomes less dependent on subsistence farming, you see a lot more of that.
Interesting.
Because once cities
Yeah.
become rich,
Yeah. Once you can.
being a subsistence farmer becomes a choice rather than the only means of
Yeah.
survival.
So there's another thing besides IP that makes it hard to leave, and that is that the agencies try to build up fandom for the agency itself rather than the individual VTubers. So, like, they do a lot of collabs, for example, which is good. That generally makes for good content. But they also just try to build up a fan base for the agency as a whole, for the company, rather than for the individual. Like, they want to build fandom for the individual VTubers because that boosts views and that's good for the company. But really, what they really want is for people to be fans of the company and loyal to the company, so that if a VTuber decides to split, the fans will stick with the company and not with that VTuber. And this does work. I was looking into like some VTuber drama stuff, and like people will go after VTubers and harass them if they're doing things that the fans think are bad for the company. So like this is clearly working on some level. And the harassment thing is its whole own thing. Obviously, it's really bad and like don't fucking harass people. But I think that it's interesting to look at like what people are saying and see like what the motivations behind the harassment is, because it shows that people are loyal to the agencies. And the agencies, I think, don't do enough to protect VTubers from this stuff. I think Hololive released like a statement about like we're gonna go after people who harass our talent, so don't do that. But I don't know if they've actually done anything about that.
I just want to suggest this is the part where they create knights.
Yeah, this is the part where they create knights.
This is what the feudal lord has to do if people are harassing their
Yeah.
townsfolk. You've got to raise a company of knights to
Yeah.
defend them.
So all of that stuff is like its own huge discussion, and I'll come back to that later probably. But the point that I'm trying to get at with all of this is that you look at like the cut, like this whole structure of like these companies take a cut, and to take a different tack on what I'm trying to explain. If you go back to like the beginning of VTubers, right? People were confused. That was the overall like most common reaction that I noticed. People were confused by this concept. They didn't understand why this existed.
The first time I watched a VTuber clip, which I stumbled across randomly, it felt powerfully
The point
wrong
here
to
is that
me.
people were confused by this, right? Like, why does this exist? And the answer, I think, fundamentally, why VTubers as a concept exist, um, why these companies spent so much time and effort trying to make this a thing, is so that they could create a situation in which they could skim the profits off of YouTubers. They were trying to create a situation in which they could take a cut from online content creators. Hence, I say, this is early stage feudalism.
I
Yeah.
have a question. Didn't agencies originally propose and create a lot of the setup for
Yes, that's
VTubing?
what I'm saying.
No, but I'm arguing that you make it sound like they found a
It's
VTubing
like they found
community.
the YouTube community and created the concept of VTubers so that they could extract money from YouTubers and streamers. Okay, I guess the analogy to like the feudal system is what they provide in exchange is they cover a lot of the startup costs and they make it easier to build an audience at the start.
I figured out what the obvious example that we haven't been using. It's like fucking boy
Oh, yeah, it has
bands.
a lot of parallels to like Japanese idol culture. The parallel here to the feudal system is like the service that they provide is they cover your startup costs basically, which if you have enough money to pay for your startup costs yourself, then that's not a problem, but a lot of people don't. Like VTuber models can be expensive and like a setup can sometimes be expensive. So they will pay for that and
I wonder how they recruited the original VTubers. I wonder what the pitch
I don't
for
know.
that
That's a good
was.
question. To me, it seems like the biggest service that they provide is just getting recognition at the start. But I'm not sure that your chances of getting into, say, HoloLive are much better than your chances of just naturally getting recognition on YouTube. I'm not positive about that. The trade off of whether it's worth it probably depends a lot on the agency and on, like, whether you think you can just randomly hit it big or how likely you are to just randomly hit it big and how okay you are with sinking all of that money into getting a VTuber model and then having nothing to show for it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly how the trade-off is worth it, but I found some stats of like the cut that one of these agencies takes. It's called Idol Corporation, and their cuts are, they claim anyway, their cuts are of YouTube tips and revenue, so super chats, they take 40%. Of merch, they take 70%. Of digital
Whoa.
goods, 40%. Of sponsorship, 45%. And yeah, those are their numbers. And then they say, on average, other agencies will usually take like 50% of super chats, 80% of merch, 60% of digital goods, and 60% of sponsorships. My point is the percentages that these agencies are taking are really quite large. Like 40% of your super chats is still a lot of money. In addition to the like, I think it's like 30%, I'm not positive, that YouTube takes of your super chats. And if you're on an iPhone, Apple also takes a percentage of your super chats.
Apple takes a percentage of
I
super
believe
chats.
if you make any revenue through an app that is sold on the App Store, Apple takes a cut of that.
Okay, so if you're using a desktop PC to
Not if the
stream, it won't
streamer's on the iPhone, if the donor is on the iPhone. If you give super chats, don't send them on iOS.
We are fully past the simple brutality of early medieval peasant life and straight into the complex and multifaceted being screwed over of 18th century French peasant.
So what you're saying is this is not early stage feudalism, but late stage feudalism.
That specific example seems like late stage feudalism because of how complex it is. Where you're paying taxes to like 8 different dudes. Like you've got the church, you've got the state, you've got private tax
I do want to
farmers.
mention that the cut of merch, like physical goods revenue, the average might be inflated by Nijisanji because from what I hear, according to a clip that I saw of a Nijisanji VTuber, this is like third-hand information, so take it with a grain of salt. Supposedly, Nijisanji takes like 99% of merch sales. I don't think this is the norm for VTuber agencies. Nijisanji just really sucks. So I guess if you want to support your favorite VTuber and they're under Nijisanji, don't buy their merch. Do something else. Okay, so there was one other thing I wanted to talk about. There's a note that I have here. Okay, actually, there are two concerns that I want to head off from any VTuber fans listening to this. I want to be very clear here. The problem that I have is not with VTubers. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with the concept of having a character that you play on a stream. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with watching VTubers. I like VTubers. I watch them too. I'm not saying that the whole thing is BS. What I am saying is BS is the whole agency system, not even the concept of a VTuber agency. Specifically, the concept of a VTuber agency that is not owned by the VTubers themselves or the people who work for it.
Are you suggesting some kind of a
Yeah,
VTuber
something
co-op?
like that I think would be a lot better.
Corporatism!
Something like a VTuber co-op would be way better because they would allow the people doing the work to actually keep the value of their work instead of having some external person just skimming this value from them and getting arbitrarily rich off of other people's labor. Or maybe not getting arbitrarily rich, depending on whether the agency just collapses or not. Regardless, it would be a better deal for everybody except the owner if the talent just got to keep the money that they made. The second complaint that somebody's probably going to bring up is like, but VShojo doesn't own the copyright to their talent's avatars. And like, yeah, they don't. However, VShojo is also still a private company, so they're kind of in like a, if I remember correctly, VShojo has some kind of arrangement where they take like 0% of super chats but like 100% of merch or something. They're a very strange company.
Who runs
Just
VShojo?
some guys. Like, I don't know. I don't think it's the streamers. The inherent problem is still there, right? The streamers don't have a stake in the company. Indirectly, it's still taking the value of their work. Now, I'm not going to dispute that VShojo sounds like a better deal than most of the other agencies, but fundamentally, they're still a company and they're still out to make money. And if things get tough, my suspicion is that they will either become a worse deal or they will go under. For the moment, yes, it does seem like a better company, but the whole model is inherently flawed. The other objection that I can see coming up is people saying, but these agencies actually treat their talent pretty well. And my response to that was going to be, well, sure, they treat their talent well now, but if things get tough or they need to like look like they're making more money for shareholders, they may not do that as much. But then I looked into it and I was like, well, no, they don't treat their talent well.
Alright, am I getting ready for some horror
I mean, you've already
stories?
heard a lot of it in that they just take these huge cuts.
Oh, I was thinking of somebody just, like, not getting the shit kicked out of them, but whatever the emotional
Well,
equivalent
the other
is.
issue that I've seen with a lot of these agencies is that they don't really take many steps to protect their VTubers from harassment. And there is a lot of harassment to go around. Seriously, this community. What is wrong with people? I haven't heard any stories of like abuse by the company, but certainly there has been some like shitty stuff that's gone on. Like agencies failing to protect their talent from harassment. VTubers have been fired over really strange things. I refuse to call it being graduated. They were fired. So there was this one Japanese VTuber who made a tweet about baseball, Mirai Gundo. There was some thing going on where there was like a big baseball tournament that was super big in Japan, and she was getting frustrated with the other team winning, you know, as sports fans do. And she said something like, why don't they just throw the ball at the head of another player and take them permanently out of the game or something? Apparently, baseball to the head can be lethal, so basically suggesting that they kill the opposing team. I don't know if I would fire somebody over that.
In Massachusetts rules baseball, fielders were allowed to put a runner out by hitting him with a thrown ball, a practice called soaking or plugging.
Yeah, that seems dangerous.
Yeah. Also, you pitched overhand.
Wait, don't you normally pitch overhand?
Overhand pitching used
I
to
think
be
that like a
illegal.
lot of the bad stuff that agencies do to VTubers basically comes down to like not paying them and failing to protect them from fans. From what I've seen, a lot of VTuber fans really suck. There are some really good VTuber fans too. Like, I'm not going to say that the community is totally, completely irredeemable. If you ever see like any of the Hololive fan animations on YouTube, like there's some really, really good animation that you can find. The highs of the community are very high and the lows are very low.
I wanted to say that this reminds me of a story. You see, back around the time I had purchased my second Lamborghini and I was driving around Tokyo. Now, I don't want to sound, like I'm bragging, like, oh, I've got two Lamborghinis. You see, this is just an effect of how popular the podcast has gotten. But you see, I was driving around, and now I was receiving all of these messages from all of these female fans, right? How they all want to romance me, but like, I'm not bragging because it's just a fact of what I'm dealing with. I was going to meet up with some other members of the Kadokawa Corporation, and we were going to go to a hostess club. Now, as we're going there, this giant 6 foot tall man approaches. Right, he's got full head to toe tattoos, but not like Yakuza tattoos, like these thin lines. He comes over and flips our car over. I mean, straight up, just flips our car over. And then just, ripping the doors open, tearing the car to shreds. And I managed to crawl out kind of, on my back, right? Like, you know how it is, right? Sometimes your car turns over and, like, you're in an awkward position. I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do with my hands. But, you fucking deal with it, right? So, as I said, I broke the window of the Lamborghini because, I mean, fuck it. I'm gonna die if I don't. It's bad, but, like, so's a lot of things. And I crawl out of there backwards, and you see this man, he turns and looks at me. And so I do the only thing I can think of, which is to just sprawl there and play dead, like, oh my god, I've been catapulted through this window and smashed my head open, and now I'm dead, and that's why I'm outside the car, and not a threat, please don't hurt me, I was doing that kind of thing. And amazingly, he buys it. He just crushes the heads of the two Kadokawa Corporation associates I was with, and the this cosplay champion whose name escapes me. We were going to offer a stream, but obviously that's not happening now. And he leaves, and I just lie there for about 3 to 4 hours, looking as dead as possible in case he comes back. The fire department shows up, and then you know what? The Japanese police arrest me. Because they're just so bored of not having anyone to arrest. The man was never found. Kadokawa Corporation had to buy off the police. It turns out my manager's second cousin was drinking buddies with Shinzo Abe back when he was alive. So anyway, what were you saying?
What was any of that?
Normal trash taste conversation.
Okay.
You want to talk about our shits now?
Okay, so my point is I'm not dissing VTubers. I'm not trying to diss the concept
We
of
are
VTubers.
dissing trash taste, though.
But we are dissing trash taste.
And we're dissing VTuber managers who I've decided are worse than your typical post-Roman Germanic
So I think
chieftain.
the lesson here is that VTuber agency owners need to steal more pigs.
Yeah, they need to get drunk and steal cows and
They
pigs.
need to pay their talents more. Divide up the cow and pig loot with the talent. There's this clip of Urocroni from Minecraft where she's like, this is the first time I've seen it, but this is my pig now. That's the energy that we need to be bringing here.
You don't want to see the pig the first time. You want to case the place before you go eat it.
True.
Perform recon. Saxon warriors would get involved in small-scale warfare and cattle rustling or whatever raiding they were doing and defending against enemy raids during the summer, spring, and autumn while the agricultural laborers did agricultural labor. And in the winter, everybody would hole up in the longhouse and they'd just have a fire going non-stop for months and just get blasted.
Oh, God.
Just
Longhouse stream.
Faded. Oh, this is a 4-month entire winter Longhouse stream.
It's a stream. You've heard of a streamer house. This is a streamer longhouse.
We're gonna do an entire.
You gotta stream like some kind of axe-based dance.
I assume your tribute from your constituency in this very early period is just straight beer, and that's what you're gonna be drinking all winter. You're going to drink the year's taxes.
Have mead?
Or possibly mead in further north places where honey is easier
Okay,
than
concept.
grain.
We start a group of VTubers that are all like early medieval things.
Oh, so we've got a Byzantine guy, a Saxon, a Celt. When winter comes and you're snowed in and the growing season is over, you all hole up in the mead hall and just go on a bender that lasts until the snow melts. People do long-ass live streams. This is the
I
longest-ass
think you'd
live
want to
stream.
sometimes shut the stream off, but like you could make it work if you rotated people, I think.
You've got a whole group of people in your streamer longhouse. Also, from what I've heard about being in streamer houses, nobody cleans. I'm glad I got to tell at least one good trash taste story down here. Like, seriously, much as I love the podcast, fuck those dudes.
I just like that they got Nile Red on there.
I thought you were going to say I like that they got nihilistic.
I don't know if they're particularly nihilistic.
They're as nihilistic as you have to be cool.
Yeah. Can we get Connor to go and steal pigs for us?
I mean, he is Welsh. We have no chance of getting in contact with Connor, but we could probably get Mandalore Gaming to steal pigs.
He would steal pigs even if we didn't tell him to.
He has the advantage of already being a knight. We could ask Mandalore Gaming about what it is that feudal noblemen actually do. He is Lord Mandalore.
Well, he's also the king of Limbo.
I assume that he has estates.
He's got a good thing going on.
I mean, he used to run a mine. Can I tell my story about the first time I broke up with someone? Because this is
just no context. I want to tell you about my breakup.
Yeah, that's pure trash taste. Also, to be clear, I think we could actually get Mandalore on this podcast. He exclusively does interviews with tiny YouTube channels. Yeah, I saw him interviewed by a VTuber with like 137
Can you send me that? Because that sounds amazing.
Yes. Anyway, now that the British have left, I think his name has become Mandalore. I'm surprised that
Is it a reference to Uluru in Australia?
No, it's a reference to how the city of Bangalore in India is now Bangalore.
This is just degenerated into memes.
I mean, again, we're doing
trash I want to wrap this up.
Yeah, and shit's fucked.
What do you mean shit's fucked? Which shit?
The VTuber industry getting harassed all the time, but also watching VTubers always feels like a symptom of my life spiraling out of control. My problem is that VTubers are absolutely a psyop by the international fascists.
Oh no.
We've established the e-girls are a fucking psyop of, like, Viktor Orban, the Serbians, and, like...
Don't bring e-girls into this.
And VTubers are just, like, a form of even more controllable e-girl.
No. Please don't say stuff like that. You're gonna piss off the VTuber fans even more.
There are fewer factors you have to manage when they don't have a
This is the thing that's gonna get us cancelled.
And so my suggestion is, in fact, most VTubers are just highly sophisticated
That's different. That is a real thing.
They're the Italian sex robots that I keep talking about.
What? No, you don't talk about that, because I've never heard you say that phrase before.
Fucking Italy banned AI chatbots due to concerns about people getting manipulated. And it's because they've been infiltrated by fucking Hungarian sex terminators created by the Fascist International.
This is just sounding this sounds like a conspiracy theory. This sounds like you're...
What?
This sounds like a conspiracy theory. This sounds like the ravings of somebody who, like, I don't know, is gonna start talking about, like, communist gangster wizards or Hawaiian dreadnoughts or something.
This kind of, like, porn-adjacent simp bait is a psyop to radicalize young white dudes into becoming neo-Nazis.
I hate that you're kind of not wrong.
And this is why Italy has passed these anti-chatbot laws with the Italian Blade Runners. This is the new anti-fascist resistance.
Italian Blade Runners.
Yeah, the fucking Italian Blade Runners. are going to administer the Voight Kampf test on all of these VTubers and all of the fucking verified amateurs out of Eastern Europe on Pornhub. At least the ones that they could get jurisdiction over in Italy. Figure out who's a real human and who's a fucking fembot, or femboy bot, as the case may be. And, graduate them.
Oh my god. This is the kind of content that makes Podcastodon what it is.
This is what makes it all worth it. This is what makes the rambling ums and ers and us bullshitting and not listening to each other worth it. Is the fucking unhinged ranting. Because the Nazis are putting radios in my soap to spy on me.
So, in conclusion, all VTubers are on crack.
Simpbait is a far-right psyop to radicalize young men into becoming neo-Nazis.
VTuber agencies are early-stage feudalism, and they should steal more pigs. And support independent VTubers if you can.
Oh, and also, if your uncle was drinking buddies with Shinzo Abe, it's easier to bribe the Japanese police. Rest in peace, Shinzo Abe, you were probably part of the op. You want to
I was trying to think of something to follow that up with, but you've completely derailed my train of thought.
I mean, you have any comments to make about
Italian Blade Runner sounds like an awesome low-budget movie in the vein of Italian Spider-Man.
I want to do something with this, and the whole Tifa Italy connection, and that quote about what scoundrels we would be if we did for ourselves what we're prepared to do for Italy.
Can we turn the op to our favor?
Well, I think what we need to do is make a badass post-cyberpunk Italian swashbuckling epic about fighting androids and fascists.
Can we abuse simp power to turn people into whatever it is that we're calling our political ideology? Social corporatism?
Right now I'm calling it the dark green.
I don't like dark green. I don't like dark green. It's a mid color. We gotta get people things that they need.
We should look into those, like, old-school political machines and distributism for more examples of how to get people.
I've been Dylan Jones.
And I've been Western Union Money Transfer Services.
And this has been...
the
podcast.
Orash Taste.
Orash Taste. Yes, there are over many million podcasts in the world.
The 6 million podcasts in the world. Thank you for listening to this one. Fuck all of this bullshit.
Fuck the police.
Western Union Money Transfer Services here with a post-episode follow-up. When we were talking about alternatives to feudalism that peasants could choose, we did not talk about the medieval city-states that were incorporated in areas of high trade in the south of France, Italy, and coastal Germany. So, yes, if you had money and trade routes and such, that's another way you could avoid feudalism, because then you could, you had a small territory, so you could just rule it by a small council, because that's about what you could communicate with for elections, is small territories. And additionally, if you had money, you could train and equip your own troops, so you don't need to bring outside help in and justify your sovereignty. Hence, depending on the circumstances, feudalism was not the only option that a community could pick. In the early Middle Ages, people, if they could manage, organized their own defenses instead of bringing in some kind of barbarian or ex-Roman warrior of some kind to form an aristocracy. Thank you. Good night.